While the sun stretched its reach across a quarter of the globe, a different kind of empire was taking shape. One built not of colonies and conquest, but of ledgers, investments, and bloodlines. And the architects of this shadow empire operated beyond the splendor of royal pageantry, yet their influence penetrated deeper than any government decree. But these dynasties arose from the fertile soil of imperial opportunity. Merchants who became shipping magnates, bankers who financed wars, industrialists who transformed raw materials into unprecedented wealth. Their names graced the cornerstones of hospitals and universities, yet their true power resided in whispered conversations and carefully penned correspondence that shaped national policies and international relations. Today, we examine how, through economic downturns, political revolutions, and the dismantling of colonial holdings, these families adapted, diversified, and endured. Imagine a time when pepper was worth more than gold, when spices could buy kingdoms, and when a single trading voyage could transform a merchant into a titan of industry. In London's narrow streets, while the Spanish and Dutch grow fat on foreign treasures, ambitious men gather in candle-lit rooms to dream of Indian riches. It was in this era that one man would rise from the grime of Fleet Street to command the most powerful trading company in history. Josiah Child, a mere brewer's son, would forge an empire through sheer force of will and ruthless ambition, amassing a fortune so vast it made nobles tremble. But even after he had exploited the British Empire's limitless hunger for exotic goods, building a personal wealth that would equal billions today, his descendants would prove that great fortunes are easier to inherit than maintain. Through their story of dizzying success and spectacular collapse, we witness how 3 generations can transform a family from London's merchant class to England's highest nobility, and then scatter their legacy to the winds. In today's episode, we uncover the rise and fall of the Child dynasty, where ambition, greed, and the intoxicating power of unlimited wealth created an empire that changed the world, only to vanish almost without a trace. In the dying years of the 16th century, Europe's heart beat for gold, and the spice trade was a brutal arena where empires risked everything for supremacy. Pepper, at 5 shillings an ounce, wasn't just spice, it was power, a prize that gripped Venetian merchants with fevered longing and pushed kings to gamble their crowns. Spain hauled £2 million of gold from the Americas yearly by 1590, a fortune that mocked England's empty vaults, while Portugal grew fat on Asia's spice routes. The Dutch, driven by a restless hunger, launched their East India Company in 1602, reaping £2 million a year by decade's end from the Spice Islands' bounty. This Dutch giant was a joint stock marvel, its shares a lifeline for men who dreamed of nutmeg-stained riches, its ships a terror to rivals. England ached to join the feast, its treasury a hollow echo, its merchants small and scrambling, their hopes pinned on a trade they couldn't reach alone. On December 31st, 1600, Queen Elizabeth I, her reign waning, signed a charter that birthed the English East India Company, a desperate bid to fight back. 24 merchants scraped together £72,000, their wool profits and borrowed coins a fragile shield against the Dutch titan. Theirs was no ordinary venture but a joint stock creation, a pact where every investor's fate hung on the same perilous thread, success or ruin. It was England's answer to a crushing need: how to fund voyages to Asia when one storm could sink a man's entire world. With pooled wealth, the company could arm ships and hire crews, a fighting chance against the Dutch and Portuguese, whose navies crushed lone traders like insects. The charter gave it teeth, permission to trade, sail and kill, offering a nation on its knees a shot at the wealth slipping through its fingers. These men didn't just want profit, they craved pepper to spice their drab lives, calicos to drape their shivering poor, a taste of glory to call their own. But the odds were grim. Ships vanished in raging seas, sailors died clawing at empty rations, and enemies waited with cannon and cold steel. In 1612, the company's gamble roared to life off Surat, where Red Dragon and Hector, bristling with 38 cannon, faced Portuguese carracks in a desperate clash. English guns thundered, wood splintered, and blood stained the waves as they drove the Portuguese back, claiming a foothold on Mughal soil. Emperor Jahangir, in Agra's gilded halls, traded a factory for silver, a small victory born of grit and guile. By the 1620s, £1 million in profit flowed from calicos and spices, a lifeline for a nation starved for hope. Forts rose, Madras in 1640, Bombay in 1668, bastions for a dream taking root. Into this furnace of want and will, Josiah Child, a brewer's son from Fleet Street, would step, his own hunger primed to seize the day. This was the forge of fortune, where the East India Company fought to turn England's yearning into power. Amid the clang of barrels on Fleet Street, Josiah Child was born in 1630 or 1631, a brewer's son with no silver spoon but a glint of iron in his soul. His father, Richard, eked out a living in London's grime, while his mother, Elizabeth, nursed dreams too frail for the city's crush, yet their boy burned with a fiercer want. Apprenticed young, he learned the ledger's cold arithmetic, but the narrow world of ale couldn't cage the ambition clawing at his chest. By his mid-20s, he broke free to Portsmouth, where the Commonwealth's navy hungered. Here, he shoveled beer and bread to sailors, his first taste of profit bitter with salt. Navy contracts piled coin into his hands, each shilling a whisper of the power he craved, until the East India Company's siren call reached his ears. In 1677, he stormed its court of directors, a chamber of velvet-clad wolves off Leadenhall Street, their eyes narrowing at this upstart who dared to belong. By 1681, he seized the governor's chair, a throne of trade where his voice cracked like a whip over men who'd once sneered at his name. Child wasn't content to count coins. He wielded ideas, his brief observations a battle cry that nations thrived on exports, colonies their lifeblood, gold their strength. Under his grip, the company surged, £1,500,000 yearly, sometimes £2 million, its ships heaving with silk, spice, and the sweat of distant lands. Bombay, a sodden gift from Charles II's Portuguese bride, became his obsession, a swamp he vowed to crown with stone and cannon. He poured wealth into its walls, turning a mire into a fortress, a defiant stake in India's soil that mocked the storms battering its shores. Then, in 1686, he hurled the company into the Anglo-Mughal War, a reckless plunge, 2,000 muskets, warships slicing the sea, to challenge Aurangzeb's empire. Bombay burned under Mughal retaliation, its skies thick with smoke, but Child stood unyielding, his jaw clenched against the chaos. The war sputtered out by 1690, a bruised peace forged, yet he'd secured Bombay's future, its scars a testament to his iron will. His fortune swelled, £200,000, a sum that made nobles blanch, as John Evelyn spat venom at this suddenly moneyed man. His daughter's £50,000 dowry lashed his blood to the Duke of Beaufort's line, a rope from Brewer's Alley to aristocratic halls. Child bent Charles II and James II to his whims, a merchant who ruled kings, his shadow lengthening with each victory. The company wasn't just his tool, it was his empire, a beast he rode to heights no brewer's son should dream. Yet every crown he touched trembled, every gain a seed of strain, as power's cost loomed over his triumph. This was Josiah Child's forge, where ambition met opportunity, crafting a legacy his heirs would inherit and unravel. By 1700, Josiah Child's death left the East India Company a titan unchained, no longer a merchant's venture, but a force with claws sunk deep into India's heart. 3,000 sailors manned its ships, 1,000 redcoats guarded its forts, and clerks scratched endless tallies, their ink mapping a dominion from Bombay to Calcutta. These weren't mere trading posts. Madras, Bombay, Calcutta pulsed as cities born of gunpowder, their streets alive with the company's relentless will. It coined silver rupees stamped with its crest, taxed villages until mud huts stood empty, and built courts where English law smothered local cries for justice. By 1740, its army ballooned to 10,000, outstripping Britain's own in India, its revenue hitting £3 million, a flood that drowned London's counting houses. This was power raw and sprawling, a beast Child had fed but could no longer steer, its hunger now its own master. In 1757, the clash at Plassey marked its zenith. Robert Clive, a clerk turned predator, slipped £2,000 to a traitor and led 3,000 men to topple Bengal's Nawab. The loot, £2,500,000, rattled into its vaults, but the Diwani, Bengal's tax rights, poured in £4 million yearly by 1765. Tea flooded England's hearths, a comfort to the weary. Opium, 30,000 chests by 1800, choked China's ports, a poison that lined British pockets. Nabobs swaggered home, their fortunes, like Clive's £500,000, buying estates and votes, their gold-stained hands a taunt to the old guard. Yet beneath the glory festered rot. Greed turned men into monsters, their wealth built on bones bleaching in distant fields. The Bengal famine of 1770 gutted 10 million lives, rice rotting in company barns, while mothers clutched starving children outside locked gates. This wasn't oversight, but choice. Profit trumped mercy, and the company's ledgers gleamed while India wept. Parliament recoiled, its Regulating Act of 1773 and Pitt's India Act of 1784 chaining the beast with rules it loathed. Profits shrank, £1 million by 1780 as French frigates harried its ships and Mysore's rockets pierced its pride. The company's army grew, its forts hardened, but its soul softened, corrupted by men who saw India as a trough to gorge upon. Child's heirs, Richard, John and beyond, lived in this shadow, their Wanstead halls echoing with a wealth Josiah had birthed, but they couldn't grasp. The company had become a paradox, a ruler without a crown, a trader turned tyrant, its strength a brittle shell over a hollow core. Every chest of tea, every opium pipe carried the weight of lives crushed, 10 million ghosts whispering through its gains. This was the monster unleashed, a legacy of Child's ambition now spiraling beyond control, its roar drowning out the cries it left behind. Richard Child, born 1680 to Josiah's third wife Emma, stepped into the baronetcy in 1704, a young man cradling a legacy forged in his father's iron will. He carried no brewer's scars, Eton and Oxford had polished him, but his blood thrummed with a hunger for grandeur, not the gritty trade Josiah mastered. In 1715, he razed Wanstead's old hall, pouring £100,000 into a Palladian palace, its 6 Corinthian columns a boast to England's elite. The East India Company, Josiah's engine, still churned, £2,500,000 from Plassey in 1757, yet Richard turned to rents, not shares. By 1750, when he died, its profits dipped to £500,000 yearly, strained by French wars and Mysore's rockets, a tide he ignored. He wed Dorothy Glynn, her Tilney estates a golden vein, and became first Earl Tilney in 1731, a title stitched from land, not sea. His Wanstead gleamed, Hogarth painted its balls, nobles danced in its halls, but no sons carried his name, only daughters to mourn his end. Richard was no Josiah. He built beauty, not empires, leaving the company's roar a distant echo as his 1750 death passed the torch. Decades rolled, and the family's threads stretched to Catherine Tilney Long, born 1789, granddaughter of Richard's sister Emma, heiress to a crumbling dream. At 16, her brother's death made her England's richest commoner, Wanstead's splendour and Josiah's ghost hers to hold or lose. In 1812, she married William Pole, a rake with £80,000 of debt, his charm a snare, his greed a flame to her fortune. Napoleon's wars, 1803 to 1815, choked the company's trade, rents falling to £7,000 a year, yet William spent like a king. He threw parties costing £5,000 a night, £60,000 on furnishings, while the company's India monopoly died with the Charter Act of 1813. By 1822, creditors circled. Wanstead's treasures, marble and silk, fetched £40,000 at auction, a pittance for their worth. In 1824, the house itself crumbled, its stones sold for £10,000, a golf course's dip all that remained of Josiah's vision. Catherine's ruin was stark. She died in 1825-36, her eyes hollow, her son's earldom a husk fading by 1884. The company too waned. Its China trade ended in 1833, a shadow of Josiah's beast, ruling India for a crown that despised it. Richard had gilded the legacy, Catherine burned it, her husband's waste a mirror to the company's excess. This was the heir and the prodigal, one who shaped a monument, one who torched it, tied to a company sliding from glory to dust. Catherine Tilney Long's death in 1825 marked the dynasty's breaking point, her Wanstead reduced to rubble, Josiah Child's dream a whisper in the wind. Her son, William, 4th Earl of Mornington, inherited a title but no substance, his 1884 death snuffing out the Tilney line with a whimper. The East India Company, too, staggered toward its grave, its India monopoly gone by 1813, its China trade dead by 1833. By 1857, its 250,000 troops faced the mutiny, sepoys turning British guns on British throats, blood soaking India's plains. The Crown seized control in 1858, dissolving the company into a bureaucratic husk, its roar silenced after 258 years. Josiah's vision, £2 million yearly in the 1880s, had birthed this beast, but his heirs watched it, and their legacy crumbled to dust. Side branches of the family flickered briefly, their stories faint shadows against the dynasty's core collapse. Elizabeth Child, Josiah's daughter from his first wife, wed John Howland in 1656, her line fading into Essex obscurity, untouched by Wanstead's glow. From his second wife, Mary, came Josiah II, who took the baronetcy in 1699 but died childless in 1704, a dead end at 37. Mary Child, Richard's sister, bore John Tilney, 2nd Earl from 1750, whose Naples exile and scandal, £10,000 squandered on art, left no heirs. Emma Child, another of Richard's sisters, married Sir Robert Long, birthing James Tilney Long, 3rd Earl in 1784, a quiet man whose only son died young. James's daughter Catherine became the prodigal, but his other girls, Dorothy and Emma, lived modestly, their £50,000 dowries scattering to lesser names. Dorothy wed Sir Philip Tilney, her life a footnote in Wiltshire. Emma faded into spinsterhood, her share of Josiah's gold a quiet burial. The company's end mirrored this unravelling, its £3 million peak in 1740 a memory, its nabob's £500,000 fortunes a taunt to its ruin. Wanstead's fall in 1824, £10,000 for its stones, left a dip in Epping Forest, a grave for a dynasty once mighty. Josiah's £200,000 empire had lifted his kin to earldoms, but their grip slipped as the company's did, undone by excess and time. Side heirs like John and James held titles briefly, their £10,000 rents no match for the 18th century's storms. The mutiny's echoes in 1857 were the company's dirge, just as Catherine's loss was the family's, both felled by their own weight. This was the end, Josiah's beast and bloodline extinguished, side branches withering, a legacy of power now a scar on the earth. The forge of fortune cooled, leaving only ruins where ambition once burned bright. History textbooks declare the British Empire dead and buried, its colonial flags lowered from Africa to Asia throughout the 20th century as indigenous nations reclaimed their sovereignty. Maps were redrawn, governments transferred, and London's direct political control faded into sepia-toned photographs and museum exhibits chronicling a bygone imperial era. Yet amid this celebrated decolonization, certain bloodlines never received the memo about surrendering their commercial kingdoms built during Victoria's reign. The Union Jack may have been replaced on government buildings, but in boardrooms across Hong Kong, Singapore and Jakarta, one British family still rules an empire built on 19th century opium profits and maintained through 6 generations of strategic adaptation. Indeed, the Keswick family have transformed themselves from colonial opium merchants into modern, diversified multi-billionaires by maintaining iron-fisted control over a sprawling conglomerate that push everything from luxury hotels like the Mandarin Oriental to Toyota sedans across 8 Asian nations. Therefore, in today's episode of Old Money Luxury, we uncover how a single family's colonial adventure evolved into perhaps history's most successful case of wealth preservation, proving that while empires may fall, certain dynasties endure by mastering the art of invisible influence. The Keswick family sits on a fortune of $1.586 billion through a 13.63% stake in Jardine Matheson, a company that began peddling opium and now peddles everything from luxury penthouses to Toyota sedans. And their collection of over 39 million shares transforms this Scottish clan into Asian tycoons with extraordinary influence over a conglomerate worth €28.99 billion. Now, Forbes places them at 34th position on Hong Kong's 50 richest list with an estimated net worth of $2.35 billion, practically middle class by the standards of Asia's ultra-wealthy elite. But these masters of financial engineering have created a labyrinth of voting rights and cross-shareholding arrangements that amplify their 13% stake into controlling power over an empire spanning 8 countries. Current family patriarch Ben Keswick presides over this financial kingdom as executive chairman, the 6th-generation face of a dynasty that predates the telephone, the light bulb, and almost every company on the stock exchange. And the corporate empire under Keswick control generates staggering numbers: $109.3 billion in annual revenue, $4.1 billion in operating income, and total assets of $91.4 billion as of 2021. Jardine Matheson ranks as the 640th most valuable company globally, commanding a market capitalization equivalent to 2.728 trillion Indian rupees, a number that they could constantly brag about, but they're too old money for that. And their business tentacles stretch across Asia through 8 major subsidiaries, including Jardine Pacific, Jardine Motors, and Mandarin Oriental Hotel Group. A swanky set of digs you've probably heard name dropped a few times by your so-called rich friends. The geography of their profit streams reveals their strategic focus. 55% flows from mainland China, 42% from Southeast Asia, and just 3% from the rest of the planet combined. Naturally, these numbers translate into substantial personal luxuries, including the historic Orr estate in Wiltshire, England, previously owned by the late Henry Keswick, who served as chairman from 1972 to 2018. Their property portfolio includes not just 1, but 2 Scottish sporting estates, plus expansive landholdings throughout southwest Scotland, where the family maintains its ancestral connection despite spending generations in Hong Kong's rarefied business circles. The thousands of hectares under Keswick ownership in Scotland provide ample space for grouse shooting, salmon fishing, and contemplating how their 165-year-old business continues thriving amid Asian economic turmoil. Yet, behind today's corporate labyrinth lies a 19th-century Scottish connection so perfectly timed it transformed 2 trading houses into a dynasty, the original merger and acquisition that continues paying dividends 6 generations later. The cold Scottish winds that swept across Dumfriesshire in 1784 gave no hint that the farmer's son born there on February 24th would one day reshape an empire halfway around the world. William Jardine, orphaned by his father's death when he was only 9, possessed a fierce determination that his modest beginnings could never contain. His older brother David, seeing something extraordinary in the boy, scraped together enough money to send him to the University of Edinburgh Medical School at 16, an investment that would alter the course of Asian history. By 1802, the 18-year-old Jardine had qualified as a surgeon from Edinburgh's Royal College, but medicine would prove merely the vessel carrying him toward his true destiny. Aboard East India Company ships, where officers were permitted private cargo space, Jardine discovered that trading exotic goods, cassia, cochineal, musk, yielded profits that dwarfed a surgeon's salary, a revelation that transformed the physician into a merchant. After 14 years at sea, he abandoned medicine entirely in 1817, plunging headlong into the perilous but profitable waters of independent trading in Canton. While Jardine was navigating his commercial ascent, another ambitious Scotsman named James Matheson entered the world on October 17, 1796, in Sutherland, born into a family whose blood already ran thick with mercantile ambitions. Young Matheson, educated at Edinburgh's finest institutions and connected through family to Indian trade networks, secured a position as a free merchant with the East India Company at 19, his youth belying his commercial cunning. Chafing under the constraints of his Calcutta apprenticeship, he fled after 3 years to Canton's bustling harbours, where Chinese silks, tea and silver flowed like rivers into Western hands. In 1821, with strategic brilliance that foreshadowed his future success, Matheson established Irisari and Company with a Basque partner and made the fateful decision to shift opium trading operations from Macau to Lintin Island, rewriting the geography of what would become the most controversial commerce of the century. When William Jardine joined the prestigious Magniac and Company in 1825, he brought not just his medical background, but an intricate web of trading relationships stretching from Bombay to Britain. James Matheson joined the same firm 3 years later, his youthful exuberance and creative flair complementing Jardine's methodical patience, a partnership forged not through friendship but mutual recognition of extraordinary commercial opportunity. On July 1st, 1832, Jardine, Matheson and Company officially emerged, built upon the skeleton of partnerships dating back 50 years, but now animated by the ruthless commercial vision of two Scottish traders who saw fortunes where others saw only foreign shores. The cornerstone of their rapidly expanding empire was opium, grown under British supervision in India, smuggled by their agents into China, and exchanged for silver that would purchase tea for Britain's insatiable market, completing a circuit of trade that drained wealth from the Chinese empire while flooding it with addiction. Through Jardine's connection with Indian merchant Jamsetji Jajibhoi, a friendship born in 1805 when both were captured by French forces, the company secured unmatched access to the highest quality Malwa and Patna opium. When Imperial Commissioner Lin Zexu seized 20,000 cases of foreign opium in 1839, Jardine sailed to London with maps, statistics, and persuasive arguments that convinced Foreign Secretary Lord Palmerston that British naval guns were the appropriate response to China's enforcement of its own laws. The First Opium War erupted soon after. Its British victory crystallized in the 1842 Treaty of Nanking that prized open Chinese ports and handed Hong Kong to Britain, a slice of the Middle Kingdom where Jardine Matheson promptly purchased the first plot of land sold. A second Opium War in 1860 further shattered Chinese sovereignty, allowing the company to expand from opium into shipping, insurance, railways, cotton mills, and countless other ventures across Asia. Both founders leveraged their commercial conquests to gain political power, Jardine as Member of Parliament for Ashburton until his death in 1843, Matheson also entering Parliament while using his fortune to purchase the entire Isle of Lewis in Scotland, where he cleared 500 families from their ancestral lands to make way for his development schemes. The company's executives became known as taipans, big bosses, their influence extending far beyond commerce into the colonial administration of Hong Kong, where British policy often aligned suspiciously well with Jardine Matheson's interests. As William Jardine succumbed to illness in 1843 and James Matheson retreated to his Scottish estate, the mammoth trading house faced a leadership vacuum that would draw in a Scottish clan whose descendants still control the Asian trading colossus today, the Keswicks, whose commercial dynasty would extend the reach of Jardine Matheson far beyond even what its founders had envisioned. The Scottish connection that would fill the leadership vacuum left by Jardine and Matheson began not with a business transaction, but with a marriage, when Thomas Keswick wed Margaret Johnston, niece of Dr. William Jardine and daughter of Jean Jardine Johnston, a union that would bind two families and forge a commercial dynasty spanning continents and centuries. From this union emerged the man who would truly establish the Keswick dynasty, William Keswick, born on April 15, 1834, in the rolling countryside of Dumfriesshire, where the winds carried no whisper of the Asian empire he would one day command. In 1855, as the Crimean War raged in distant fields, 21-year-old William Keswick boarded a ship bound for China and Hong Kong, becoming the first of what would eventually stretch into 6 generations of Keswicks entwined with the fortunes of Jardine Matheson. The young Scotsman's ascent through the company hierarchy proved meteoric. Within 4 years, he had established a Jardine Matheson office in Yokohama, extending the company's commercial tentacles into Japan just as that isolated empire reluctantly opened to Western trade. By 1862, William had returned to Hong Kong as a partner in the firm, his vision and ambition recognized by the aging founders who saw in him the future of their commercial empire. 12 years later, in 1874, William Keswick assumed the title of Taipan, the supreme position within the company, now presiding over a trading house whose influence stretched from London docks to Tokyo harbours. His leadership extended beyond mere commerce into the governance of Britain's prized colony, serving 3 terms on Hong Kong's legislative and executive councils between 1868 and 1887, where colonial policy and Jardine Matheson interests frequently aligned with suspicious precision. While in Hong Kong, William cultivated diplomatic connections as well, serving as Consul General for the distant Kingdom of Hawaii, a role that earned him the title of Knight Commander of the Hawaiian Order of Kalakau, an exotic honorific for a Scotsman who had travelled far from his homeland's shores. After 12 years as Taipan, William departed Hong Kong in 1886 to take control of Matheson and Company in London, now answerable only to Sir Robert Jardine himself, cementing the Keswick family's position at both the Asian and European ends of the business empire. His influence in British society grew alongside his commercial stature, establishing a grand family home at Eastwick Park in Surrey, serving as the county's High Sheriff in 1898, and representing Epsom as a Member of Parliament from 1899, his political career reflecting the growing prominence of Far Eastern trade interests in British imperial politics. When William Keswick died on March 9, 1912, he left behind not just substantial wealth, but a legacy that his son Henry would inherit and extend. Born in 1870 in Shanghai, Henry Keswick breathed the air of international commerce from his first moments, assuming his birthright at Jardine Matheson after gaining experience in the company's New York offices and arriving in Hong Kong in 1895. Like his father before him, Henry served as Member of Parliament for Epsom while maintaining his directorship at Jardines, embodying the intertwining of British political and commercial interests in Asia. In 1911, the symmetry between empire and business was made visible when Henry returned to Britain to represent Hong Kong at the coronation of King George V, his presence acknowledging the crucial role of merchant princes in maintaining Britain's far-flung imperial possessions. Henry later sailed his yacht, Cutty Sark, back to Hong Kong in 1922, a journey that symbolized the ease with which the Keswicks navigated between East and West, between the company's Asian operations and its London boardrooms. When death claimed Henry in 1928, he left an estate valued at £466,409, roughly £46 million in modern currency, and 3 sons who would carry the Keswick name into the tumultuous decades ahead: David Johnston, William Johnston Tony, and John Henry Keswick. As the world trembled on the precipice of depression and war, these 3 brothers would face challenges their father and grandfather never imagined, steering Jardine Matheson through the darkest hours of Japanese occupation and into an era where Asian nationalism would threaten the very foundations of the trading empire their ancestors had built. The 3 brothers who inherited the Keswick dynasty faced a world spiraling into chaos, Shanghai burning, empires crumbling, and the certainties of colonial commerce dissolving beneath their feet. William Johnston, Tony Keswick, born in Yokohama in 1903, returned to his ancestral Britain for education at Winchester College and Trinity College, Cambridge, before sailing back to Asia in 1926 to claim his birthright within the family enterprise. By 1935, Tony had ascended to leadership of the Shanghai office, then Jardine's Far Eastern headquarters, where he oversaw the company's interests amid the growing shadow of Japanese militarism that was engulfing China. As chairman of the Shanghai Municipal Council during the tense pre-war years, Tony embodied the fading authority of Western commercial interests in China, surviving an assassination attempt when a Japanese representative shot him after he announced a rate increase at a public meeting on the Shanghai racecourse, his life saved by the heavy fur-lined overcoat that stopped the bullet. When war finally erupted across the Pacific in 1941, Tony's commercial expertise transformed into strategic intelligence as he served as head of the China Theatre for Britain's Special Operations Executive, the merchant prince becoming spy master in service to the empire that had long protected his family's commercial interests. His younger brother John Keswick, born in 1906 and arriving in Shanghai in 1929, assumed control of the company's operations after Tony's shooting, later fleeing to Ceylon when Japanese forces captured the city, but continuing to serve British interests by joining Admiral Lord Louis Mountbatten's staff. After Japan's defeat in 1945, John returned to a devastated Shanghai, working tirelessly to rebuild Jardine's trading networks throughout a China now locked in civil war between nationalist and communist forces. The communist victory in 1949 forced a pivotal moment in the company's history, the relocation of Jardine's head office to Hong Kong, followed by a painful withdrawal from mainland China in 1954, with losses totaling $20 million as the company's interests were effectively nationalized by Mao Zedong's government. John Keswick's administrative talents extended beyond business into colonial governance when he joined the Hong Kong Executive Council in 1952, retiring as taipan the following year, but later orchestrating with his brother the buyout and public flotation of Jardine Matheson, a financial restructuring that modernized the century-old trading house. As the colonial era waned, the fourth generation of Keswicks emerged to navigate the treacherous waters of late 20th century globalization and Asian economic transformation. Henry Neville Lindley Keswick, Tony's son born in Shanghai on September 29, 1938, joined Jardines in 1961 after education at Eton and Cambridge. His rise through company ranks meteoric: director by 1967, senior managing director by 1970, and chairman by 1972 at just 33 years of age. While his brother Chippendale, Chips Keswick, broke family tradition by building his career at London merchant bank Hambros instead of Jardines, youngest brother Simon Keswick remained loyal to the family business, joining in 1962 and eventually returning as senior managing director in 1983 after his father orchestrated the removal of managing director David Newbigging. Under Simon's leadership, Jardine Matheson underwent a strategic metamorphosis, diversifying internationally rather than remaining exclusively tied to Hong Kong, and crucially, redomiciling the firm's holding office to Bermuda to shield it from the uncertainties surrounding Hong Kong's 1997 handover to China. This defensive maneuver reflected the enduring conflict between the Keswicks and Chinese authorities, a tension dating back to the opium trade that had first enriched their ancestors and continuing into modern times as Beijing never forgot the company's role in China's century of humiliation. As the millennium drew to a close, the aging fourth generation prepared to hand control to their heirs, who would face an Asia dominated not by European colonial powers, but by China itself. The shadow of colonial history looms long over the fifth and sixth generations of Keswicks, who now command the trading empire built upon opium and imperialism nearly 2 centuries ago. In November 2024, the family patriarch Sir Henry Keswick passed away at 86 years old, having guided Jardine Matheson as chairman for decades, while orchestrating the delicate diplomatic dance of rebuilding relationships with China without loosening the family's iron grip on power. The mantle of leadership now rests with Ben Keswick, son of Simon Keswick, who assumed the position of executive chairman in 2012, becoming the latest in an unbroken line stretching back to William Jardine's time. Alongside Ben stands his cousin Adam Keswick, son of Sir Chippendale Chips Keswick, maintaining the family's tradition of collective leadership that has preserved their dynasty through revolutions and world wars. The youngest generation includes Archie Keswick, who joined the board in 2019 after holding various positions, including CEO of Pizza Hut Vietnam, venturing far beyond the trading floors that once defined the family business, but never straying from the ancestral imperative to control their commercial kingdom. These modern taipans preside over a conglomerate utterly unrecognizable to their ancestors, a Bermuda-domiciled, Hong Kong-based multinational with tentacles extending across Asia through a web of strategically controlled subsidiaries that would make a Bond villain envious. Today's Jardine Matheson no longer trades opium or silk, but instead dominates through gleaming skyscrapers, ubiquitous storefronts, luxury hotels, and automotive dealerships across Southeast Asia. Their crown jewel remains PT Astra International, Indonesia's largest automotive company, providing commanding position in Southeast Asia's largest economy, a brilliant pivot from the Chinese ports where the company first established its fortunes. Recent years have brought significant headwinds, with profits plummeting amid global economic turbulence. Yet the company maintained its generous dividend, speaking to the Keswick family's supreme confidence in their diversified portfolio's ability to weather storms that would sink lesser corporate vessels. The family's control remains absolute through a labyrinthine system of cross-shareholdings and voting rights that has frustrated outside investors but preserved their dynastic grip through market crashes, pandemics, and geopolitical upheavals. While their appointed CEO holds a minuscule fraction of company shares, he serves at the pleasure of the Keswicks, who continue their ancestors' tradition of maintaining strategic control while delegating day-to-day operations. And unlike many billionaire dynasties who flaunt their wealth across social media, the Keswicks maintain a remarkably low public profile, retreating to their 7,000-acre Scottish estates far from the Asian heat and paparazzi lenses, with the recent exception of Archie Keswick's relationship with Poppy Delavigne, sister of model Cara Delevingne. Thus, through wars, revolutions, financial meltdowns, and global pandemics, the Keswick family has demonstrated a remarkable ability to evolve while maintaining control, transforming from opium traders to property developers, from colonial merchants to multinational executives, yet always keeping family hands firmly on the tiller of the corporate vessel their ancestors launched. In the final years of the Ottoman Empire, a dynasty emerged that would take control and transform Asia's destiny. Yet few in the West know their name. The Sassoon family, often called the Rothschilds of the East, built an empire so expansive that even their European counterparts would marvel at its reach. Their story begins with a desperate flight from persecution in Baghdad, as family patriarch David Sassoon arrived penniless on India's shores as an Iraqi Jewish immigrant in the 1830s. What followed was perhaps history's most remarkable tale of commercial conquest. Within decades, the Sassoons had woven a web of trade that stretched from Mumbai to Shanghai, London to Hong Kong. Their influence extended far beyond mere commerce. They were kingmakers and nation-shapers, their tendrils reaching into politics, culture, and society across Asia. Yet beneath the glittering facade of success lay darker truths. The Sassoons' rise was fueled by the opium trade, their wealth built on human suffering and addiction. In today's episode, we tell a tale of both brilliant innovation and ruthless exploitation, of philanthropic works and moral compromise, of a family that helped build modern Asia while simultaneously profiting from its darkest vices, as we describe the Sassoon family's controversial history. In Baghdad's ancient Jewish quarter, where merchants had conducted trade since the Babylonian exile, David Sassoon moved through two worlds. By day, he served as treasurer to Baghdad's Pasha from 1817 to 1829, his family's claimed lineage to King David opening doors in Ottoman society. Born in 1792 to Sassoon ben Saleh, the Jewish community's revered Nasi and chief treasurer to the Pashas, young David inherited a legacy that bridged religious scholarship and worldly power. His father's position opened Ottoman doors, while claimed lineage to King David himself lent the family an aura of sacred authority among their fellow Jews. Within the walls of his childhood home, David absorbed the rhythms of traditional Jewish life. His education immersed him in biblical and Talmudic wisdom, while his ear caught the mingled sounds of trade, Arabic, Persian, Turkish, and Hebrew flowing through the marketplace. This linguistic dexterity would later prove as valuable as any inheritance, as would the financial acumen learned at his father's side. In 1818, David's marriage to Hannah Joseph of Basra seemed to cement his place in Baghdad's Jewish aristocracy. 4 children followed, but Hannah's death in 1826 marked the beginning of changes that would reshape not just David's life, but the commerce of colonial Asia. His second marriage to Flora Haim would add 10 more children to his legacy, children who would later help build an empire spanning continents. The Ottoman Empire of David's early adulthood was a realm in decline, its traditional structures buckling under the weight of European influence. As Britain and France extended their reach eastward, new ideas of Western civilization penetrated Ottoman society, forcing reassessment of centuries-old hierarchies. The Tanzimat reforms loomed on the horizon, promising, or threatening, to reshape the empire along European lines. For Baghdad's Jews, this period of transformation brought increasing peril. By 1829, when David Sassoon served as treasurer to the Pasha, persecution under Dawood Pasha's reign had intensified beyond endurance. Sassoon made the calculated choice to flee, first to Persia, then to British-controlled Bombay by 1832. He arrived at a moment of profound opportunity. The British East India Company's grip on Indian trade was loosening, even as its territorial power expanded. Sassoon, with his understanding of Eastern trade routes and growing grasp of Western imperial ambitions, saw what others missed. The company offered not just safety, but access to a vast colonial network ripe for exploitation by someone who could navigate both worlds. Establishing himself first in the Indo-Persian textile trade, Sassoon began building a commercial empire that would eventually stretch from Bombay to Shanghai. He had escaped persecution, but in doing so, he'd found more than refuge. He'd discovered a path to power that would transform both his family's destiny and the face of colonial Asia. Thus, while building Bombay's first family synagogue and teaching his 8 sons Hebrew texts, he simultaneously cultivated relationships with colonial administrators who could grant access to protected trade routes and military escorts for his ships. The transformation from respected religious leader to colonial empire builder came after the First Opium War, a conflict sparked by Chinese resistance to British opium imports that ended with China forced to open its ports to foreign trade. As British gunboats bombarded Chinese ports into submission, Sassoon recognized an opportunity. His entry into the opium trade marked a moral watershed. The family would profit from forced cultivation in India and forced consumption in China, their ships protected by the same British military that had created these markets through violence. Each new trading post revealed the brutal efficiency of Sassoon's model. While synagogues rose alongside warehouses, his sons oversaw a network that extracted wealth from every level. Indian farmers forced to grow poppies instead of food, Chinese communities devastated by addiction, laborers working in conditions that maximized profit over humanity. The contradiction was stark. Morning prayers followed by afternoons calculating profits from human suffering. Ancient ethical teachings paired with ruthless exploitation. Their success grew in lockstep with British colonial expansion. Sassoon's ships, protected by the British Navy, carried legitimate cargo as cover for the opium that generated their greatest profits. He positioned his sons strategically: Hong Kong, Shanghai, Singapore, each office combining religious observance with commercial predation, their family's traditions preserved through the fruits of others' oppression. When David Sassoon died in 1864, he left his eldest son Albert an empire built on paradox, a family renowned for both religious scholarship and ruthless trade, their charitable works funded by profits from human misery, their ancient traditions maintained through the exploitation of both British power and Asian suffering. As Albert and his brother Elias looked toward even greater expansion, the questions weren't just about preserving heritage, but how much deeper into colonial exploitation the family would delve. Under Albert and Elias Sassoon's leadership, their father's commercial vision would expand beyond even his imperial ambitions. The brothers, born in Baghdad's ancient Jewish quarter but educated in British Bombay, embodied the family's transformation from Eastern merchants to colonial power brokers. Albert, the eldest, inherited not just his father's business acumen, but his ability to move between worlds. When David Sassoon died in 1864, Albert took control of David Sassoon and Sons with a vision that stretched far beyond the opium trade, encompassing cotton mills, docks, and banking ventures across Asia. Elias, the more adventurous brother, had already proven himself in China by age 24. From his base in Guangzhou, he wove a network of trading relationships that would parallel British imperial expansion with ruthless efficiency. The brothers' timing proved devastating for China, their rise coinciding with what historians would later call the country's century of humiliation. The Second Opium War, sparked by British demands for increased trading rights and the legalization of opium imports, ended with China forced to open 11 new ports to foreign commerce. As British gunboats withdrew from these newly opened treaty ports, Sassoon trading houses moved in, establishing footholds in territories still reeling from military defeat. These strategic acquisitions, built on the foundations of imperial force, would later face intense scrutiny. But in the moment, the brothers saw only opportunity in Asia's wounds. The family maintained its tradition of building synagogues and schools across Asia, even as their commercial empire expanded. Yet these charitable works were funded by profits from an opium trade that wrought devastation on Asian communities. The paradox was stark. Sassoon-funded hospitals often treated the same addiction their trading houses helped perpetuate. A vast chasm separated the family's growing wealth from their workers' conditions. While Albert built his position in London society and Elias established himself in Bombay's elite circles, their Indian labourers worked under increasingly harsh conditions. The family's Jewish teachings about charity and fair treatment seemed at odds with their business practices, where profit consistently trumped human considerations. By 1890, when Albert was made a baronet by Queen Victoria, the Sassoons had become integral to British colonial commerce. Their ships carried cargo through trade routes established by imperial force, their offices managing transactions that helped maintain British dominance in Asia. The family that had fled persecution in Baghdad now profited from a system that imposed its own form of subjugation across the East. That same year, as Reuben Sassoon's involvement in the royal baccarat scandal with the Prince of Wales made headlines, cracks began appearing in the family's carefully constructed facade. The next generation would face even harder questions about the true cost of their dynasty's success. As the 19th century drew to a close, the Sassoon dynasty stood at the intersection of East and West, their story emblematic of power's complexities in the British Empire. In 1890, Queen Victoria's elevation of Albert Abdullah David Sassoon to baronet marked more than personal triumph. It signaled the family's transformation from outsiders to architects of empire. Sir Albert's new title acknowledged not just the family's vast wealth, but their essential role in Britain's commercial dominance across Asia. The worlds Sir Albert straddled were on full display in his London mansion. Noble guests who came to dine found themselves fascinated by the kosher kitchen, while his collection of Oriental art spoke to the family's unique position as cultural translators in an age of empire. Here was a man who could host British lords while maintaining ancient Jewish traditions, who could discuss Oriental art while orchestrating Western commerce. But it was Sir Albert's niece Rachel Beer who truly embodied the era's transformative possibilities and its contradictions. In 1891, she shattered Victorian conventions by taking the editorial helm of The Observer. 2 years later, she added The Sunday Times to her domain, wielding unprecedented journalistic power at a time when most women couldn't even vote. Her marriage to Frederick Beer, a Christian, had cost her much of her family's approval, yet she refused to retreat from public life. Rachel's finest hour came with her coverage of the Dreyfus affair, which began in 1894 when a French Jewish army captain was wrongly convicted of treason. While French society tore itself apart over the case, Rachel's determined investigation led her to the real culprit, Count Esterhazy. Her 1898 interview with him helped expose the truth, contributing to Dreyfus's eventual exoneration and revealing both her journalistic courage and her complex relationship with Jewish identity. Yet beneath these triumphs lay careful silences. Neither Rachel in her newspapers nor Albert in his mansion spoke of the opium trade that had built their positions in society. Like many elite families of their era, they preferred to let their philanthropy speak louder than their fortune's origins. As the family's business interests evolved, this pattern of public achievement and private discretion would only deepen. Following the 1907 agreement between Britain and China to reduce the opium trade, the Sassoons began diversifying their commercial enterprises. This transformation would eventually lead to significant real estate investments across Asia, though the family's influence in trade remained substantial throughout the period. Throughout these years, different branches of the Sassoon family embodied varying relationships with their heritage. While some maintained strong connections to their Baghdadi Jewish roots, others became increasingly anglicized. In London's elite circles, many Sassoons now moved effortlessly between cultures, though this adaptation came with its own costs, a growing distance from the traditions that had once defined their identity. The period also saw rising tensions within the extended family over their commercial legacy. Siegfried Sassoon, a more distant relative who would later gain fame as a war poet, represented a new generation beginning to question the foundations of their prosperity. Though his most explicit criticisms of the family's business practices would come later, the seeds of this internal conflict were already taking root. By 1920, the Sassoons stood at a crossroads. Their philanthropic works, hospitals, schools, and synagogues across Asia continued to expand, even as questions about the source of this charitable wealth grew more pressing. The next decades would force the family to confront their role in shaping both British imperialism and Asian commerce, as a new era of scrutiny dawned. The interwar years marked a decisive shift in the Sassoon dynasty's trajectory, embodied in the restless ambitions of Sir Victor Sassoon. Born in 1881 to the comforts of British aristocracy, the great-grandson of David Sassoon inherited more than just the family's vast business empire in 1924. He inherited its contradictions. As the third Baronet of Bombay, Victor represented both the fulfillment of his great-grandfather's dreams and a break from the family's traditional path. Shanghai became the stage for Victor's reinvention of the family legacy. Transferring much of their wealth from India to China in the 1920s, he sought to transform the family's image from colonial traders to modern builders. His masterpiece, the Cathay Hotel, rose 10 stories above Shanghai's Bund in 1929, its green pyramid roof and Art Deco facade declaring a new era of Sassoon influence. Here was no mere hotel, but a monument to Western sophistication in the East. While Fortune magazine marveled at the hotel's silver hoard and Shanghai's expatriates waltzed in its ballroom, Victor hosted lavish parties in his penthouse suite. From its windows, offering commanding views of the city in all directions, he could survey an empire built on his family's ability to bridge east and west. Yet these glittering gatherings served another purpose. They were Victor's weapon against the social exclusion he still faced as a Jew, even as a British baronet. You see, Victor's architectural ambitions in Shanghai represented not just a business strategy, but an attempt to architect a new identity for the family in an age of mounting questions about colonial wealth. This was because beyond the Cathay's walls, the world that had enabled the Sassoons' rise was changing. And though the family had long since diversified beyond the opium trade that built their initial fortune, the 1920s and 1930s brought increasing scrutiny of such colonial enterprises. As historical accounts of the period began to emerge, the family's role in Asian commerce faced increasing examination. Throughout Asia, social and economic changes challenged the colonial system that had enabled the Sassoon success. In Bombay's textile industry, where the family maintained significant investments, workers joined broader labor movements demanding better conditions. These industrial tensions reflected deeper questions about wealth accumulated during the colonial era. The rise of nationalist movements across Asia fundamentally challenged the commercial framework the family had operated within. In India, independence activists critiqued the entire colonial economic system. In China, Both nationalist and communist forces sought to redefine their country's relationship with foreign business interests, including the extensive Sassoon holdings. The approach of World War II accelerated these changes. Victor Sassoon, anticipating the growing tensions in East Asia, relocated from Shanghai to Bombay in the spring of 1941, months before Japanese forces occupied the city. The war years saw the disruption of trade networks across Asia, as conflicts transformed the commercial landscape the family had navigated for generations. By 1950, as Asian nations emerged from colonial rule, the Sassoon legacy demanded new consideration. Their story, which had once been primarily told as a tale of immigrant success and cultural preservation, now raised complex questions about wealth, power, and responsibility in the colonial era. For the next generation, understanding this heritage would require confronting both its achievements and its contradictions. The dismantling of colonial Asia left behind monuments to Sassoon power in steel and stone. Most iconic among them, the Peace Hotel, once Victor Sassoon's celebrated Cathay Hotel, still commands Shanghai's Bund, its green pyramid roof a reminder of an era when this Art Deco masterpiece embodied the height of Eastern glamour and Western might. Victor himself, that most theatrical of the dynasty's later generation, had long since departed Shanghai by the time of his death in 1961 in the Bahamas, far from the empire he'd built and lost. In Mumbai, more practical legacies endured. The Sassoon docks, carved into the city's coastline by Albert Abdullah David Sassoon in 1875, now hosts Mumbai's largest fish market, a bustling hub providing livelihoods for over 150,000 people. The David Sassoon Library stands nearby, its neo-Gothic arches offering scholarly refuge just as they did when first opened in 1847, though now its reading rooms host researchers studying the very family that built them. The end of empire brought the twilight of the dynasty's golden age. Sir Philip Sassoon's death in 1939 marked the passing of a singular figure, art collector, political insider, and legendary host who had served as private secretary to Field Marshal Haig in the Great War before becoming Under Secretary of State for Air. His estates at Port Limpon and Trent Park had been stages where British power was displayed and deployed through elaborate social ritual. His sister, Sybil, the Marchioness of Cholmondeley, carried the family's social influence through the century's tumult. From her marriage into the British aristocracy in 1913 to her death in 1989, she embodied the family's transformation. She served as superintendent of the Women's Royal Naval Service in World War II, while undertaking the restoration of her husband's ancestral Houghton Hall, preserving one heritage while adapting to a rapidly changing Britain. The family's spiritual and intellectual tradition found new expression through David Solomon Sassoon, who died in 1942 after assembling one of the world's great collections of Hebrew manuscripts. His opus, O Hell David, catalogued over 1,200 manuscripts, preserving centuries of Jewish learning. His son, Rabbi Solomon David Sassoon, carried this scholarly legacy forward, declining even the opportunity to become Sephardi Chief Rabbi of Israel to pursue his studies. Today, Solomon's son, Rabbi Isaac S.D. Sassoon, continues this unbroken chain of Jewish scholarship into a new century. The academic world has brought new perspectives to the family's story. Scholars examining colonial trade networks have detailed how the Sassoons adapted to and influenced British imperial expansion. Their role in the opium trade, once relegated to footnotes, has become central to understanding how individual families operated within and benefited from colonial systems. Yet these same studies have also illuminated how the Sassoons maintained their Jewish identity and traditions while navigating between Eastern and Western worlds. In contemporary Britain, James Sassoon, Baron Sassoon, has served in various government positions, including as Commercial Secretary to the Treasury, while acknowledging his family's complex history. His public service represents yet another evolution in how the family has engaged with British society. The family's philanthropic legacy presents particular challenges for modern institutions. Universities, hospitals and libraries, built with Sassoon money, face questions about how to acknowledge their benefactors while addressing the origins of that wealth. Some institutions have chosen to contextualize their Sassoon connections through educational programs about colonialism's complex legacy. Others have established research funds focused on studying the impact of colonial trade on Asian societies. Today, the Sassoon story offers no simple lessons. Their rise from persecuted minority to colonial power brokers, their simultaneous preservation and abandonment of traditions, their mixing of religious ethics with commercial exploitation, all reflect broader questions about power, identity, and moral responsibility that remain relevant. As museums, universities, and historians continue to examine colonial legacies, the Sassoon dynasty stands as a testament to how personal choices made within imperial systems reverberate through generations. Imagine you are a patriotic Englishman or woman in the summer of 1917. The air is thick with the tension of war, and the nation is united in its resolve against the German enemy. Then, on the 17th of July that year, a momentous announcement from King George V reaches your ears, stirring a sense of pride and relief within you. The King has issued a proclamation that will forever change the identity of the British royal family. The name of Windsor is to be borne by his royal house and family, and the use of all German titles and dignities is to be relinquished. This decision, you understand, is driven by the growing anti-German sentiment that has gripped the country, especially after the tragic bombing of Upper North Street School in Poplar by German Gotha bombers on June 13, 1917, which claimed the lives of 18 innocent children. Indeed, the royal family's shared name, Gotha, with the bombers, has only intensified the public's demand for a change. The proclamation therefore signifies the end of all German references and titles within the royal family. No longer will there be degrees, styles, dignities, titles, honours and appellations associated with the dukes and duchesses of Saxony or the princes and princesses of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Thus, with one announcement, the current ruling family of the United Kingdom became officially English, a complex and fascinating legacy that continues to this very day. In today's episode, we'll explain exactly how we got here, from a small noble family in an obscure part of Germany, through the legendary reign of Queen Victoria, all the way up to today, under our King Charles III, as we describe how the Windsor family became English. Before we begin our deep dive on how a seemingly German family such as the Windsors could become English, as it were, we must first clarify, for the uninitiated, just how deep the connections between the English people and the German people run. For native Brits, this will come as little surprise. However, for our global audience, it is a crucial foundation to understand, for it demystifies the entire idea of a German family ruling over Britain, for as we'll see, the Windsors were not even the first Germanic family to do so. With that all said, the genetic and cultural overlap between the English and German people is inextricably connected, spanning ethnicity, linguistics, and politics. Both ethnic groups trace their origins back to the Germanic tribes of ancient Europe. These tribes, which lived in regions now known as Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands, began migrating and settling in different parts of Europe around the 1st century BC. And among these groups, tribes with names that will immediately become apparent to you, the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes all played a significant role in the early formation of English society. For example, the Angles, unsurprisingly, where the words England, i.e. Angleland, and English come from, originated in the Anglia Peninsula, which is part of modern-day Schleswig-Holstein in Germany, and almost borders the modern German region of Lower Saxony, where the Saxon portion of the term Anglo-Saxon comes from. Furthermore, the Anglia Peninsula is actually a smaller part of the larger Jutland Peninsula, where the Jute tribes come from, which forms the mainland part of Denmark itself. Subsequently, during the early Middle Ages, these native tribes to Lower Saxony and the broader Anglia-Jutland Peninsula invaded and settled in Britain, laying the groundwork for the Anglo-Saxon culture that would shape England. Thus, from an ethnic standpoint, your common Englishman or woman without a doubt has Germanic blood running through their veins. To smaller and larger degrees, and rulers throughout the centuries would have been keenly aware of that. Additionally, the linguistic connection between English and German is deep-rooted. Both languages belong to the West Germanic branch of the Indo-European language family, and Old English, spoken from the 5th to the 11th centuries, was heavily influenced by Old High German and other Germanic dialects brought by the Anglo-Saxon settlers. And despite the substantial influx of Romance vocabulary following the Norman conquest in 1066, a significant portion of English basic vocabulary and grammar remains Germanic in origin. For example, common English words such as house, house in German, bread, Brot in German, and king, König in German, share similar roots with their German counterparts. But these linguistic similarities extend beyond vocabulary to grammatical structures and syntax. Both languages utilize similar word orders in sentences, especially regarding verb placement. Historical documents and literary works from the early Middle Ages reveal remarkable linguistic patterns between Old English and Old High German, further underscoring their shared heritage. And of course, politically speaking, the ties between England and Germany have been complex and varied over the centuries. The medieval period saw alliances and conflicts shaped by dynastic marriages and territorial ambitions, but one of the most notable political connections was established with the ascension of George I of the House of Hanover to the British throne in 1714. Now, with your background solidly in place, it should come as no surprise to you that this German-born King of England was born in none other than Lower Saxony. That's not much of a spoiler if you've been paying attention. The so-called Hanoverians ruled over the British Empire until 1901, including George III, for you Yanks. And interestingly, this also meant that these, quote, British monarchs also ruled the German state of Hanover, although the two realms remained separate. Indeed, Queen Victoria herself, the last of these Hanoverians, first language was German, as her mother was originally from Germany, and she was raised by a German governess, Louise Lehzen. When she later married her German cousin, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, the couple regularly spoke German together. And although Albert was fluent in English, he and Victoria could often be heard talking and indeed arguing in German when in private. However, perhaps we're getting ahead of ourselves here. In order to first establish how a set of Germans could become quintessentially English, we need to go back much further than the Victorian era and place ourselves firmly in something known as the Holy Roman Empire. The origins of the House of Windsor, initially known as the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, are deeply rooted in the historical fabric of the Holy Roman Empire. Now, the Holy Roman Empire, lasting from 962 to 1806, was a political complex of territories in Central Europe that included regions that are now part of modern-day Germany, France, Italy, and other countries, but was historically seen as German because its core territories and political structure were predominantly Germanic. And this empire functioned as a loose confederation of smaller states and principalities governed by the Holy Roman Emperor, shaping the cultural and political landscape of German-speaking people. With that said, the lineage of the House of Windsor traces back to a 10th century Saxon nobleman named Theodoric I of Wettin, also known as Dietrich or Thierry. Theodoric's heritage is debated among historians, with some suggesting a connection to Emperor Charlemagne, one of the most influential rulers in European history, or to the Counts of the Harz Mountains, a region in central Germany. But Theodoric's descendants soon gained prominence within the Eastern March, a frontier region that was part of the Holy Roman Empire. This family established a castle named Wettin, later Germanized to Wettin, marking the foundation of the House of Wettin, hence Theodoric of Wettin being his name known to history. Soon, the House of Wettin would play a significant role in European history, ruling over several key regions in Germany and Europe, including Saxony, Thuringia, and Meissen, areas central to medieval politics and economics. For example, the discovery of silver in the Meissen region in 1116 greatly enhanced the wealth and power of the Wettins, and the Wettins' influence extended through notable descendants such as Frederick Augustus I, Elector of Saxony, who later became King of Poland, and Augustus the Strong, who was also King of Poland and a patron of the arts and architecture. Despite their growing power, however, the Wettins faced challenges from the Hohenzollerns, rulers of Brandenburg, and later the Kingdom of Prussia. These Hohenzollerns, originally hailing from the region around Swabia, rose to prominence through leaders like Frederick William, the Great Elector, and Frederick the Great. His reign in particular marked significant military and administrative reforms, making Prussia a rival to other German states, including those ruled by the Wettins. Therefore, we can arguably say that the House of Windsor not only fought against the German Empire of World War I and the Third Reich of World War II, but they also crossed swords with Frederick the Great of Prussia himself. Now, the Hohenzollerns' ascendance overshadowed the Wettins, culminating in a significant territorial division after the death of Frederick II in 1464. This division split the Wettin territories into the Ernestine and Albertine branches of the family, each ruling different parts of the territory. Specifically, the Ernestine line, centuries later, would eventually lead to the formation of what would become the House of Windsor. Now, during the Protestant Reformation, the Ernestine Wettins, the future Windsors, played a pivotal role. For example, they ruled Wittenberg, a key city in Saxony where Martin Luther, the founder of Lutheranism, found refuge. This protection provided Luther the space to develop his ideas, which significantly influenced the region, making it a stronghold of Protestantism by 1526. Thus, we could also argue that the ancestors of the House of Windsor had a direct hand in helping to form the foundations of Protestant Christianity itself, and indeed, the support of the Ernestine Wettins was crucial in the early days of Protestantism, effectively shaping the religious history of the world. However, after losing in some key conflicts, much of the lands under the House of Wettin began to scatter into smaller spheres of influence, known as the Ernestine duchies. One out of many of these, the Duchy of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, would surprisingly emerge as the stud of Europe through shrewd intermarriage over the coming centuries. Now, this duchy was modest in size, smaller than Luxembourg, with a mid-19th century population of about 150,000 souls. Yet, the ambitions of the Coburg family reached far beyond their diminutive domain, embedding their lineage into almost every royal family across Europe. This first began with Prince Josiah of Coburg, whose close relationship with the legendary Empress Catherine the Great of Russia provided a crucial opportunity for the family. In 1795, Catherine sought a bride for her grandson, Grand Duke Konstantin Pavlovich of Russia, and turned to the Coburg sisters. 3 of them were invited to Russia, and the youngest, Princess Juliane of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, married Constantine in 1796, despite his reluctance. This union, although strained by Constantine's harsh behavior, brought significant prestige to the duchy and demonstrated the Coburgs' ability to secure influential marital alliances. Meanwhile, Prince Leopold of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, Duke of Saxony and future King of Belgium, also began to make his mark in Russian nobility. He distinguished himself in battles against Napoleon, eventually entering Paris triumphantly in 1814. Leopold's reputation as a skilled warrior and diplomat grew, and by the age of 23, he found himself in Britain, where he was introduced to Princess Charlotte Augusta of Wales, the heir apparent. Although there were initial doubts, fortune favoured Leopold. Princess Charlotte's engagement to another suitor fell through, and she turned to Leopold, whose sensible and good-natured demeanour won her heart. They married in 1816, deeply in love, positioning the Coburgs on the brink of inheriting the British throne. However, tragedy struck on the 5th of November 1817 when Princess Charlotte died during childbirth. This event reshaped the British royal family's succession and prompted urgent actions to secure legitimate heirs. However, the crucial moment that would connect a centuries-in-the-making lineage that would eventually rule the British Empire would be when Prince Edward, Duke of Kent and Strathearn, married Leopold's sister Victoria, maybe you recognise that name, of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld. Their union produced none other than Queen Victoria, marking the place in our story from which we began. Thus, the seemingly insignificant duchy had grown to shape the continent's history through love and political savvy, creating a lasting impact. However, as we previously noted, Queen Victoria, the last Hanoverian, spoke German as a child, so how exactly did the House of Windsor become English? To get our answer, we'll have to flip to the next chapter. In 1830, the aforementioned Leopold I of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha became the first King of Belgium with strong backing from his in-laws ruling Britain, marking a notable rise in the prestige of the Saxe-Coburg and Gotha dynasty. Thus, Leopold's influence was far-reaching, notably impacting his nephew, one Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. The family further intertwined when in 1840 Albert married our lovely Queen Victoria of Britain, a union carefully planned by Leopold to strengthen his family's influence within the British Empire. Therefore, due to patriarchal naming practices of the time, Prince Albert's marriage to Queen Victoria embedded the Saxe-Coburg and Gotha name into the British royal lineage. As Prince Consort, Albert was instrumental in British affairs, advocating for various social reforms and helping modernize the monarchy. The couple had 9 children who were strategically married into different European royal families, thereby spreading the influence of the Saxe-Coburg and Gotha line across the continent. When Queen Victoria died in 1901, her son Edward VII ascended the throne, marking the beginning of the Edwardian era and the official reign of what we now know as the House of Windsor. Edward VII was succeeded by his son George V in 1910, and George V's reign coincided with the tumultuous period of World War I, which heightened anti-German sentiments in Britain, partly due to direct attacks on London by German bombers, funnily enough known as German Gotha bombers. Against this backdrop of nationalism and anti-German sentiment, George V made a significant decision to rebrand the royal family. On the 17th of July 1917, he issued a royal proclamation changing the family name from the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha to the House of Windsor. This decision was driven by a desire to align the monarchy more closely with British national identity and to distance it from its German roots. And the name Windsor was chosen due to its historical association with British history and the royal residence, Windsor Castle. In addition to the name change, George V renounced all German titles held by his family as part of a broader effort to Anglicize the monarchy and assert its British identity. But this decision was not without ridicule. His cousin, Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany, made a jesting remark about the renaming, referencing Shakespeare's The Merry Wives of Windsor. After the war, the House of Windsor continued to evolve as the monarchy sought to redefine itself. Despite efforts to distance themselves from their German roots, intermarriages between British royals and European nobility persisted, maintaining the interconnected nature of European royal houses. For example, Queen Elizabeth II's marriage to Prince Philip of the House of Glücksburg, a branch of the House of Oldenburg, of partial German origin, forced him to renounce his German titles and adopted the surname Mountbatten, an anglicized version of Battenberg, before marrying Elizabeth. In more recent times, however, King Charles III has a strong connection to his German heritage, evident in his proficiency in the German language and his frequent visits to Germany. For example, during his first state visit to Germany as king in March 2023, Charles delivered parts of his speech to the German Bundestag in German, showcasing his linguistic skills and cultural affinity. Additionally, the British royal family has extensive familial connections to other European royal families, many of which are of German origin. This network of relationships can be traced back to Queen Victoria, who was dubbed the Grandmother of Europe due to her strategic marriages of her children into various European royal houses. For instance, Queen Victoria's descendants, and thus relatives of the Windsors, include monarchs such as Queen Margrethe II of Denmark, King Harald V of Norway, and King Carl XVI Gustaf of Sweden, all of whom have German ancestry through Victoria's lineage. In the world of old money, that is, wealth passed down through multiple generations in a family, there can be a lot of superlatives attached to this enigmatic sect of human society. Old money families are the most powerful, the most discreet, the hardest to get into. And yet, even for members of the old money class around the world, there is one family that seemingly towers above them all. The ones that make the powerful look powerless, the ones who make billionaires look like baby boys, and the ones that live more like kings than actual kings. Indeed, one name in modern history reigns above all when we think of old money, and that is, quite naturally, the name of Rothschild. Now, sure, you've seen a ton of videos and documentaries about this family. You've been told the financial details, you've learned about the political power plays, and of course you've heard the theories about their global networks. But have you ever heard the full story from the very first member of the family up until today, in a neutral, unbiased format. Have you ever been told about the step-by-step growth of this one-of-a-kind dynasty without any agenda on either side, leaving the interpretation of their influence up for you to decide on your own? In today's episode, we'll allow you to do just that, telling the good, the bad, and the luxury of the entire saga as we describe how the Rothschilds went from new money to old money. In the raw heart of Frankfurt's Jewish ghetto emerged an unlikely hero on the 23rd of February, 1744. Named Meyer Amschel Rothschild, his birthplace was one of Germany's earliest and most restrictive ghettos, existing in the teeming underbelly of the Holy Roman Empire from 1462 until 1811. Judengasse, or Jews' Lane, was a labyrinth of squalor, a congested and unhygienic curve of cobblestones, stretching a mere 10 to 12 feet across. Sprawling from the Bornheimer Gate in the north to the Jewish cemetery in the south, the district would lock its 3,000 inhabitants within its unyielding clasp daily. Sundays, Christian holidays, and the cloak of night transformed this ghetto into an inescapable fortress, its occupants forbidden from entering public gardens or attending coffee shops. You see, this was a world without freedoms. Ownership of land, affiliation with guilds, and certain professions were forbidden fruits to this community. You see, the sheer density of life in Judengasse was beyond comprehension. Several families huddled together in single apartments, a concentration of humanity that the rest of Frankfurt could scarcely fathom. Amidst this harsh reality, Meyer Amschel was born to Amschel Moses Rothschild and his wife, Schonsche Rothschild. His father, a money changer and silk trader, counted Prince William of Hesse among his clientele. Despite this royal connection, Amschel Moses was far from wealthy, and the family lived in crowded conditions, sharing their dwelling with an extended family of up to 30 members. But the hand of fate can be both cruel and kind. When Meyer Amschel lost both his parents to an epidemic in 1755 and 1756, he found himself under the mentorship of Wolf Jacob Oppenheim in Hanover. This fortuitous turn of events initiated Meyer Amschel into the intricate web of business and the exclusive world of court agents. Adept in dealing with rare coins and medals, Rothschild returned to Frankfurt in 1764. His reputation preceded him, and his clientele swiftly expanded. His rise to prominence was then accelerated by a lucrative deal with the hereditary prince of Hesse-Kassel. His marriage in 1770 to the daughter of a court agent was another feather in his cap, bringing with it a hefty dowry and a network of influential connections. He was fast becoming Frankfurt's eminent dealer in coins, medals, and antiques. Despite being victim to a substantial embezzlement by an unprincipled employee, his fortune was so significant that he still reigned supreme as one of the era's most prominent bankers. Thus, Meyer Amschel Rothschild, a child of the ghetto, ascended to become a legend, unperturbed by the prejudices and limitations that marked his humble beginnings. As the mantle passed from Meyer Amschel to Nathan Rothschild following the former's demise, the family empire not merely endured, but flourished, speaking to the father's ingenuity and the son's tenacity. As mentioned, Meyer Amschel's association with William IX, the hereditary prince of Hesse-Kassel, forms the first core part of the controversies surrounding the Rothschilds' power structure. The story goes that when Napoleon ousted William from power in the 1790s, he entrusted his vast fortune to Meyer Amschel for safeguarding, resulting in Rothschild's own poverty while preserving the prince's riches. This tale, although reportedly fictional, does harbour an element of truth. Meyer Amschel's real duty to William wasn't guarding gold, but overseeing his English investments. Appointed as Hofaktor by William IX in 1769, Meyer Amschel supervised the prince's estate and tax collection. This fruitful alliance, coupled with the prince's opulence, formed the cornerstone of the Rothschild dynasty, eventually gaining a commanding presence in European finance and banking. Thus, this association with William IX propelled Meyer Amschel's third son, Nathan Rothschild, onto the path of success. Born on September 16, 1777, in the confines of Frankfurt, Nathan Rothschild's childhood spent within the Frankfurt ghetto also left an indelible mark. Under his father's tutelage, the young Nathan learned the family trade, banking, and absorbed the sense of unity pervading the Jewish community of Frankfurt. Commissioned to England in his 20s by his father, Nathan rapidly ascended to prominence, overseeing William IX's English investments and, in time, establishing himself as a banking titan in London. Now, a pivotal event took place in 1806 when Nathan tied the knot with Hannah Barrett Cohen. This strategic intermarriage afforded him an elevated social standing and a network of influential business contacts. Hannah, hailing from a prosperous family of linen traders, was born in 1783. Her father, Levi Barrett Cohen, had migrated to London from Amsterdam in 1770, achieving some repute as a merchant. In fact, the House of Cohen had prior business transactions with Nathan's father, the aforementioned Mayer Amschel. Specifically, upon Nathan's arrival in London in 1798, he was recommended to the Cohen family for an informal apprenticeship. Now their marriage indeed helped Nathan gain social stature and business connections. Hannah exceeded the traditional expectations of a Rothschild wife, participating actively in business and advisory roles. Her financial prowess was acknowledged, and she was deemed a formidable business partner. Thus, her marriage to Nathan not only opened a treasure trove of valuable connections, but also helped to catalyze the growth and triumph of the Rothschild banking dynasty. Now, by 1810, the family enterprise had evolved into Mayer Amschel Rothschild and Sons. Nearing the twilight of his life, Mayer Amschel would issue a groundbreaking decree from his deathbed. The family business was to be the exclusive property of his 5 sons, a dictate that was stringently followed by his successors. Now, in the clandestine cobwebs of Europe's politico-economic circles, the Rothschild dynasty were no strangers. Like silent puppet masters, they manipulated the game of power with panache, their financial roots entangling the continent's elite. Men of power danced, their strings delicately controlled by these generous patrons, either through promising investment gambits or hush-hush exchanges of illicit wealth. Ominously, the elder Rothschild, Amschel, was once caught musing, "As Jews, our fate is to buy our way through or watch the Gentiles take the lead." These subtle maneuvers, while drawing criticism, nonetheless amplified the family's reach, fortifying their success. Prominent among their web of debtors was the exiled King Louis XVIII. The maestro of their financial orchestra at the time, Nathan Rothschild, brokered a loan of £200,000 for the British Crown, facilitating the monarch's grand return to France in 1814. Yet, like any true political chess master, their benevolence came with a ticking time bomb. Nathan demanded a prompt repayment, with a handsome interest, 3 years later. Thus, the Rothschilds weaved a network of loans and investments, their tendrils reaching out to key political players like Wilhelm von Humboldt in the 1820s, promising them long-term gains. Now their most invaluable asset was the perpetually penniless Austrian statesman Clemens von Metternich, a regular recipient of the Rothschilds' fiscal generosity. In return for their assistance, Metternich provided them with vital political intelligence and business opportunities, whilst also championing their cause for Jewish emancipation in Frankfurt. The extraordinary loan of 900,000 gulden, extended to Metternich after his staunch support of the Frankfurt Jewish community, however, raised a few skeptical eyebrows. This alliance bore fruit in the form of a regular exchange of classified information between Metternich and Salomon Rothschild. But the partnership was not without its critics. The unfortunate, self-inflicted end of David Parish and the collapse of his enterprise, Fries and Company, were blamed on the Rothschilds' burgeoning influence and their newfound alliance with Metternich. These intriguing affairs cast a shadow over the Rothschild name, painting them as puppet masters of corruption, a dark reputation nurtured by business rivalry and leveraging the anti-Semitic sentiment of the time. Additionally, in the world of art patronage, the Rothschilds wielded an equally formidable influence. Over the years, they amassed a treasure trove of artistic gems, their collection becoming a symbol of their prestige. For example, a fondness for the 17th century Dutch masters was a family trait. James Rothschild in 1840 secured Rembrandt's renowned The Standard Bearer, placing this jewel in the crown of their collection at the Grand Salon of Rue Lafitte. However, contrary to popular belief, their interest was not simply confined to the classics. In their world, art was more than an investment. It was a symbol of their wealth, yes, but also a way of life. It gave life to their stately mansions and bespoke of their refined taste. Music, too, was integral to their repertoire. For instance, Nathan Rothschild, in January 1828, engaged the services of the acclaimed Ignaz Moscheles, Felix Mendelssohn's mentor. Their salons regularly echoed with the sublime melodies of masters like Mendelssohn, Liszt, Hall, and Joachim. The Parisian chapter of Polish legend Frédéric Chopin's storied career even began under the patronage of none other than James Rothschild. In fact, such was the depth of their involvement in the world of music that even legendary anti-Semite Richard Wagner, it was rumored, banked with the Rothschilds. Despite converting their fortune into far-reaching influence, the Rothschilds remained true to their Jewish faith. Karl Rothschild was said to have clearly asserted that their wealth was a Jewish legacy. They championed the cause of Jewish advancement, in stark contrast to the prevalent misconception that they were indifferent to the hardships faced by their fellow Jews. In truth, they contributed generously to Jewish charities and schools. Their rise to prominence did not obscure their humble origins or the suffering of their brethren. They fought for their community's equal rights, formed strategic alliances, and enhanced their standing as a remarkable family, far surpassing their material success. Now, espionage, a nemesis lurking in every shadow, posed an escalating threat, especially when their dispatches were laced with elements of political subterfuge or potentially lucrative information. Thus, 1814 marked a significant shift towards the employment of private couriers, a move calculated to outmaneuver this constant menace. This past era before instantaneous electronic communication was dominated by the indispensable private courier, and in the Rothschilds' grand scheme of affairs, they formed the essential backbone of their vast international communication grid. They were the trusted guardians of priceless information, the lifeblood that breathed power into the sprawling body of the Rothschilds' financial empire. Thus, the couriers were more than just bearers of messages. They were crucial defenders against breaches of information. You see, in a world where a whiff of news could alter the course of markets and fortunes, their private network rendered the velocity of communication as vital as the information itself. As adaptable as they were essential, couriers had the flexibility to hasten their delivery based on the family's exigencies. Moreover, these couriers were a symbol of the global extent of the Rothschilds. In an age fragmented by national demarcations, linguistic obstacles, and complex geopolitics, the family's private couriers formed a seamless, efficient network that spanned the breadth of Europe. By the winter of 1827, Solomon Rothschild, Nathan's brother, had found this system deeply rooted in their operations in Vienna. It was a system so exquisitely refined that it elicited the envy of their competitors, triggering a slew of imitations. Nevertheless, for a good part of the early 19th century, the Rothschilds' courier service remained unrivaled in delivering premier service to diplomats and statesmen. This intricate communications network is the second core pillar of discussions involving a clandestine society revolving around the Rothschilds. The audacity of their influence, the lightning speed of their operations, and the depth of their couriers' reach fuels historical investigations of a more covert, more nefarious global network. Indeed, the family harnessed their mighty infrastructure for their advantage. However, the extent to which it qualifies as a larger global plan is at your discretion, viewers. Additionally, while this out-of-family network undeniably paved their path to eminence, the true brilliance lay in the synergy among the 5 Rothschild houses in London, Frankfurt, Paris, Vienna, and Naples. This multinational matrix, the world's largest banking structure, was the conduit for their financial influence throughout the European economic epicenters. However, the empire, admittedly built on secret family dealings, private communications, and a vast global network, was left reeling after the sudden death of Nathan Rothschild. Nathan's influential hand had harmoniously orchestrated the operations of the 5 houses. "We owe him everything, really everything," his brother Karl had once admitted. His sudden departure in 1836 jolted the family, and with the markets already on a downward spiral, it only seemed to hasten the looming financial crisis. As the calendar pages of the 1830s were torn away, the illustrious Rothschilds shifted their formidable might towards the pulsating arena of industrial finance. With a calculated gamble, they invested a lion's share of their resources into the construction of railways, effectively grasping the helm as they navigated the birth of France's railway system. Yet their commanding role was seen through the dark spectacles of suspicion by a burgeoning faction of the media, resulting in an alarming rise in negative sentiment towards the distinguished family. The year 1846, a harbinger of ill fortune, saw the Rothschilds' reputation gravely marred. A train, under their aegis, hurtled off the tracks and screeched to a disastrous end, claiming 14 innocent lives in its ruinous aftermath. This catastrophic event served as a catalyst, positioning the Rothschilds at the center of the intensifying social revolution of 1848. Public sentiment, balancing on a razor's edge between civil rights and an ever-widening chasm of wealth inequality, began to broil with antipathy towards them. The family's impregnable fortress in Frankfurt came under assault. Windows splintered under the wrath of angry stones, the sacrosanctity of their haven violated. More misfortune pursued the Rothschilds as the plunging value of government securities, which formed the bedrock of their investments, threatened to tip them over the edge of financial abyss. The fickle finger of fate extended a lifeline to the London household, sheltering it from the revolutionary tempest. This fortuitous turn of events enabled the London Rothschilds to extend a crucial lifeline to their kin, preserving their legacy from total obliteration. In the decades that unfurled between 1850 and 1914, the Rothschilds grew their influence like tendrils reaching across banking, politics, and a myriad of significant events. Quite notably, in this time, they became titanic movers in the world's political machine. A key instance of this influence is Lionel de Rothschild's role in financing the construction of the Suez Canal. You see, initially the Suez Canal Company found it challenging to sell shares internationally. Countries including Britain, the United States, Austria, and Russia didn't buy any shares, whereas all French shares were rapidly sold in France. Opening for shipping on November 17, 1869, the Suez Canal significantly influenced global trade and contributed to an increase in the European colonization of Africa. Ismail Pasha, Said Pasha's successor, was compelled to sell Egypt's shares due to mounting external debts. To facilitate this, in 1875, the London banking house of N.M. Rothschild and Sons lent £4 million to the British Prime Minister, Benjamin Disraeli, acting for the British government. This facilitated the purchase of the Suez Canal shares. Now, the Rothschild family's role in the Suez Canal project is just a snapshot of their vast influence in international finance and politics. The Rothschilds additionally played a crucial role in the emancipation of Brazil from Portugal. The agreement stipulated that the nascent Brazilian government must remit £2 million sterling to Portugal as a cost of freedom. The monumental task of marshalling this sum fell to the finance titans, N.M. Rothschild and Sons. Commandeering the London market with their deft strategies, they successfully amassed the required capital for the newly anointed Empire of Brazil. Furthermore, the family's reach extended even into Africa, bankrolling Cecil Rhodes in the establishment of Rhodesia. Additionally, when the Russo-Japanese War cast its shadow, the Japanese government turned to the London and Paris branches of the Rothschilds. Their consortium responded by issuing Japanese war bonds worth an astonishing £11.5 million. Thus, in this era, the name Rothschild resonated with echoes of extraordinary political power, financial might, and opulent decadence. In fact, their empire, encompassing at least 41 palaces of unparalleled luxury, led the British Chancellor of the Exchequer, David Lloyd George, to assert that Nathan, Lord Rothschild, was the most powerful man in Britain by 1909. Now, as the opening decades of the 20th century opened, they brought a seismic shift to the Rothschild dynasty. Their erstwhile harmony fractured by the emergence of national taxation. The unified ledger of commerce they once proudly held fractured, causing their various arms to diverge, establishing themselves as autonomous banking entities. The once illustrious quintet of brothers and their offspring had by the time of the First Great War become a memory rather than a reality. It was the ominous rise of the Third Reich during the 1930s, however, that truly rattled the Rothschild fortress. The Austrian wing found itself teetering on a precipice with the annexation of Austria in 1938, with the family coerced into selling their banking operation for mere pence on the pound. The Rothschilds found themselves a hunted clan, with the exception of Louis Rothschild, who, caught in the National Socialists' snare, only secured his freedom after a considerable family-funded ransom. When Louis was finally granted exit in March 1939, the Third Reich set its sights on SM von Rothschild, placing it under ruthless administration, their estates plundered by high-ranking Austrian museum officials. The spoils of war left the Austrian Rothschilds with little more than remnants of their once formidable assets. The Second World War's ruthless march claimed France next. The French Rothschilds cast into a storm of uncertainty as their assets were seized in the iron grip of German occupation. Despite their bank being restored in the war's aftermath, the oncoming tide of socialism under President François Mitterrand in 1982 posed a further challenge of insurmountable proportions. The mighty Rothschild behemoth found itself subsumed yet again, this time in the churning waters of nationalization. And then came their monumental lapse, America. The New York Times astutely highlighted the Rothschilds' failure to seize the bountiful opportunity that lay across the Atlantic. Evelyn de Rothschild, with a sense of heavy regret, conceded that in spite of their illustrious lineage in international finance, we never grappled with the American challenge, and that remains one of our family's most glaring missteps. He further lamented that even though the Rothschilds had established a foothold in the US through various investments and alliances, they had never truly broken ground as they had in Europe. This lack of penetration into the American financial landscape marked a profound strategic shortcoming for a family that had so often defined the contours of global finance. Today, the heralded progeny of the Rothschild lineage, a name still entwined in wealth and power, is first embodied by the baronial figure of Jacob Rothschild, the fourth Baron Rothschild, British peer and an ace in the arena of investment banking. His resplendent persona radiates in the sphere of the Rothschild banking dynasty that still stretches across continents and centuries. RIT Capital Partners, a titan of financial trust under his chairmanship, stands tall on the London Stock Exchange with an estimable net asset value in the vicinity of £2 billion. The scales of wealth also still tip in his favour, placing his net worth at an extraordinary $5 billion. On the ladies' side, the noteworthy player in the family is Lady Lynn Forrester de Rothschild, an American-British billionaire entrepreneur with a net worth surpassing the $674 million mark. She rules as the CEO of E.L. Rothschild LLC. The boards of the Estée Lauder Companies and the Economist Newspaper Limited are additionally graced by her presence, as are the International Advisory Council of Asia House, the Council on Foreign Relations in the United States, and Chatham House in the UK. Next, we have James Rothschild, a man whose marital bond with Nicky Hilton extends the influence of the illustrious Rothschild name into the world of fashion and power couples. Born in our lovely capital London in 1985, James boasts an impressive pedigree as the sole son of the late Amschel Rothschild and Anita Patience Guinness. James's journey in finance began with a tenure at the family's N.M. Rothschild & Sons Limited as an investment banker. But currently, James commands the title of founder and managing partner at True Arrow Partners, a firm with a global footprint in the technological growth sector. His net worth stands today at roughly $1.3 billion. The family has also helmed a group of banks managed by Rothschild Continuation Holdings since 2003. With a complex structure of control involving multiple holding companies and the guiding hand of Baron David René de Rothschild, these banks remain a symbol of the Rothschilds' still pervasive influence across Europe. Thus, from the humble origins of Meyer Amschel Rothschild in the heart of Frankfurt's Jewish ghetto, to the myriad tendrils of influence spread by his descendants across continents and centuries, the Rothschild legacy, like a grand symphony, resonates through the ages. Their lineage, sewn into the very fabric of modern history, embodies the most legendary saga of a family with new money, indeed maturing into old money.